and listen to this interview because we are giving you history. Now, we can't talk about music history without talking about Hitsville, USA, Motown, Berry Gordy.
That's right.
Let's talk about Motown and Berry Gordy, your opinion on it.
Well, like I said, being in the music business, I was familiar with Berry Gordy when he first started working with Marv Johnson and, of course, the great Jackie Wilson. And, you know, he produced those early Jackie Wilson records. And believe me, you got to go a long way to beat that. I mean, that was, to me, the first time you had somebody who was black, who was so polished and sophisticated where he appealed to whites as well. You know, the color wasn't the issue. It was how great he was. And he was very sophisticated, and you always saw him with the tie. He always looked very, you know, just sophisticated.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And, of course, I mean, you know, if you don't know who Jackie Wilson is, you got to be deaf. That's all I can say. Because you can't beat Jackie Wilson. In fact, Motown kind of, you know, when Jackie Wilson at the Copa was a pretty big album, and that's why, you know, Berry Gordy always said, when you knew when his acts made it, when they could play the Copa.
Mm-hmm. Right. It was
that means that everybody. That means everybody accepted you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. Motown, of course, you all know the acts, you all know the songs. Holland Dozier Holland, and then of course last week we lost Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops.
I was heartbroken over that because you know I mixed I mixed a lot of things on the Motown box, a lot of them in stereo for the first time, and that was an honor for me. You know, it was a job, but I also looked at it as an honor because I really respect that music, and you know, that music's part of my life too, and it means an awful lot to me.
Mm-hmm. And let's go into the whole teen pop period. Like in the 70s, you had the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds. In the 80s, New Edition, New Kids on the Block. Then in the 90s, early 2000s, you had Backstreet Boys and NSYNC.
Again, I love that period of music because they were based on songs. Absolutely based on song. You still needed a good song to make those groups work. You needed a good song. And the harmonies, I mean, it was going back, it was like going back to the doo-wop days, but modernizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Remember where kids used to string on the street corners?
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't remember that.
Of course I remember that. You standing outside with your group. You got your bass, tenor, baritone, and your alto. Got your sweater jacket and standing out by a Corvette. And the group is named either after a bird or a car.
Well, what's even funny, I mean, when you remember, I forget the DJ's name there, but on WMCA here in New York was a radio station, Contemporary, and the DJ said, I'm going to play a record, and the program director doesn't want me to play it, but I'm going to play it anyway, and I'll probably get fired, but I don't care because it's a great record. And he played the Chi-Lites' Have You Seen Her? All I can tell you is, when that record started to happen, every time you got into a subway, there would always be kids singing that harmony of that song. That's what that song did to bring kids back into singing again, was that song.
Right. And then also, too, I can't believe I slept on this record for so long. And, well, I knew this group was that good, but just listening to this album really made me have a newfound respect for this group. Beach Boys and Pet Sounds.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, you know, the Beach Boys were absolutely molded their sounds after a group from the 50s called the Four Freshmen. And which was they played their own instruments. They were college kids, and they had a number of big records in the 50s, and they were on the same label as the Beach Boy, Capitol Records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, Pet Sounds, big album, ahead of their time in terms of production. Brian Wilson, and the harmonies,
absolutely,
backgrounds. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, the way that, that album was way ahead of its time. Now, let's talk about George, John, Paul, Ringo, the Beatles.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about like their significance and what they brought to pop music, and you know what made the Beatles so special and so popular.
I'm trying to think what I felt like when I first heard their music. I liked Love Me Do. I liked their early records, but you know what they were doing was they were copying some of our soul singers who there were more race records back in those days, like Larry Williams, who did Short Fat Fanny and Slow Down. Those were all Larry Williams records, and they covered a lot of our black artists on their first couple albums until they started breaking out into their own. So you have to remember with that whole English sound, our black blues singers, you know, like Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters, Lightnin' Hopkins, Jimmy Reed, these guys are on pedestals over in England. Here they weren't for some reason, but over there, you know, they were considered gods of music. And they deeply influenced everybody else, including the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton. I mean, without that music, you wouldn't have any of those people today. You really wouldn't.
I definitely agree with that. Then, of course, on the ladies' side over in England, you had your Blue Out Soul with Dusty Springfield and Lulu, who did To Serve With Love.
Right, but Dusty will always be considered England's greatest soul singer. There's no getting around it. I mean, she was one of a kind.
Definitely agree with that. Now, let's fast forward to the present, and what are you up to nowadays?
What am I up to?
Yes.
Well, I'm still mixing away. I'm working on... I mixed a group here called... in fact, I remixed their whole album called the Brand New Heavies, which is a soul group out of England. And they've got a good name for themselves here also. And working on another group out of Germany and Denmark called Cool Million, and they're very much into soul music. And you know, I find myself more and more going back to soul only because there's something honest about it. You know, it's not contrived, it's not made up, it's something you feel and express, and you know, and to me, we need that kind of thing.